All right, welcome back to another episode of Cameo Podcast Civic Election Edition. We're a little bit rushed on time because both my guests and myself are pretty busy these days, but I think Mr. Mayor, Ken Christian, you're a little bit busier with your re-election campaign. How's that going?
So, it's going really well, but as I was mentioning before we went live, it's difficult to be the mayor and run for mayor. That's something that I wasn't used to last time. I was sort of a free agent last time, had all the time in the world to campaign and visit with people. And now, of course, you have a full slate of appointments and meetings and things, and then you campaign on the weekends and at night. So it's different, but we're getting out there. We're getting our message out before the Kamloops voters, and we're going to see what happens on the 20th.
Yeah, I heard your radio ad, 17 years as school trustee. Now you're mayor running once again. What changes have you seen in Kamloops in these last, 19 years that you've been part of, being a, what is it? Someone who's working for the people.
Right. I've lived in Kamloops for 40 years, and I've been elected for 25 of those. This is my 10th straight election, 18 years on the school board, 6 years as a city councillor, and now elected in the by-election last year as mayor. And I've seen a ton of changes, as has anyone else who lives here. But, from a civic governance perspective, I've seen, quite a few changes, certainly in the way that you campaign now. When I started, you didn't have social media. You had a lot of print media, and you lived or died by the editorials and those kinds of things. But nowadays, there's a different way of campaigning, and you have to use social media outlets, and you have to be able to adapt. You need a strategist, and you need to keep track of what the issues are, both from what you're hearing and what other people are talking about. So it's a different way of going about it. But it's a different city, too. I mean, Kamloops has really evolved over the last 40 years that I've lived here from a more resource-based kind of blue-collar economy, and that to now where we still respect those traditional industries, but we are approaching a learning economy kind of status, and Kamloops is much more cosmopolitan. And I credit Thompson Rivers University, quite frankly, for really changing the look and feel of this city. So, I think that we've come a long way in 40 years, and I want to be part of leading us through the next 4.
Yeah, well, we're sitting here at Leon John's having a coffee. We can see the station, getting pretty close to completion across the way. What do you vision for, the next generation of people who are going to take on the torches, the Corys, the Mitches of Bright Eye Brewing and whatnot? What would you like to see them come to with Kamloops? What do you want Kamloops to offer them?
Well, interesting you point that development out. ARPA investments, really have been front and center in terms of the Tranquil corridor, and kudos to Joshua Knack and to Mitch for believing in this area. This has kind of got that commercial drive feel to it, and here at Leon John's, it's absolutely a prime example of that. It's edgy, it's tacky. I was over here for Brew Loops the other night, and just had a blast. And I think people in this precinct are quite adaptable to the change in the city. But beyond that, my vision for downtown is not a downtown, it's downtowns plural, and I emphasize the S because it's this Tranquil Road precinct, it's the traditional Victoria Street piece that we have from BCLC all the way out to Memorial Arena, and it's the TRU precinct. And our challenge is to connect those three so that we have a feeling of downtowns, and we have an area in which people can move about with active transportation fairly easily. We've got pretty good access across the river now for pedestrians and bikes. We're starting with that Peterson Creek walkway to get the TRU to downtown piece organized. So it's changing, and I think that that kind of a bit more sophisticated kind of feel to the city is something that I've noted. We're really celebrating arts and culture, and we celebrate our traditional history with the Kamloops Teshekweppmik, and I think that Kamloops is very unique. I was talking to the people off the Rocky Mountaineer the other day about a number of ideas that I have about ecotourism and about cultural tourism, and Kamloops is ripe for both of those kinds of opportunities.
But you also have, the tourism school at TRU, which I come from, actually, right, is such an underutilized resource in this town to develop those alternative economies in the tourism sector and whatnot. And we've seen a great growth in that. I also saw you engaging with some West Side secondary students or Valley View secondary students or something online on Twitter. They had some questions for you. What are your thoughts in terms of engaging with people in different mediums? You know, you're chatting with me on a podcast. Kamloops just dropped the Let's Talk platform.
Right.
How do you engage with people in these new mediums in this ever-evolving thing, but also to make sure that there's, you know, a positive discourse happening at the same time?
Yeah, and that's the key, is that positive discourse, because sometimes you can, you know, sort of it's a race to the bottom in terms of some of the social media. But I have certainly always had a warm spot for engaging with students. 18 years in the school board, 3 kids. I mean, I understand, I get that, and I have always used that as a sounding board as to what we need to be thinking about next, because really this is the next generation of voters and people that are going to be doing what I'm doing now and steering our city in the future. So that's important. I have a Facebook account, 2 of them actually, one private one and one Ken Christian for mayor. But I've lost kind of faith in Facebook. It's really, you know, with the kinds of leaks and breaches and things that they've had, that it's really become quite weak. And I have an Instagram file that people follow. I have 2 Twitter handles. I'm not very good at it, but I tweet. And the biggest asset that I'm using is a website, www.kenchristian.ca. And I drive people to that because that's a spot where they can definitively find out about me, my platform. And if you're not interested in that, there's some great pictures to look at. But it does tell you a lot of civic information about where to go vote and when to get out and where the advance polls are and how you can get mail-in ballots and those kinds of things. So that's a spot for people. And increasingly, people don't want to have you knock on their door. They certainly don't want to have you phone them. So, you know, that's a way that they can actually come to you to seek out the information that they're looking for.
Yeah, your platform is easily available, and you've been a year for a mayor. Sorry, for a year or so. I flipped the 2 for whatever reason. That's what I like this podcast. It's unedited. You know, the issues, the problems, they come out, they arise, they happen. Yeah. That's fine. What's something about yourself that frequently doesn't show up in the media? You know, since we're not having a narrative per se of an article of the newspaper or a video piece, what's something that you wish was talked about more about yourself, or just who you are as a person that you kind of want to share with my listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question, because so often people, you know, you're the mayor, they put you on this pedestal, you're not really human, right? And I found that to be an interesting phenomenon of being mayor in a city the size of Kamloops. But I am human. I have 3 kids. I have the same kind of problems that every other family has. I was raised on a farm, and I understand a lot of the issues related to agriculture and have a very warm spot for them. You know, our family is no different than anyone else's. And one of the things that I've said in my platform is that I want to make Kamloops better for my family and for yours. And Nick, John, and Taryn are, my kids, and they're actually only one of them's in the country right now, but not able to help me with this election. But they are what I see, what I want for everyone else in Kamloops: opportunity to get jobs here in Kamloops, to get entry-level housing, to get continuing education at postgraduate levels, and to be able to live in a city that has this livability quotient that really allows you to see kind of great acts, great entertainment without having to go to Seattle, without having to go to Toronto or to Vancouver or Calgary. So, you know, let's make this a place that we are all proud of across a real wide continuum. Absolutely,
yeah. That's part of what my podcast is a lot of the time is chatting with people who I think need to have a level of exposure. You know, I think there's a lot of great talent in this city, but there just isn't a way to expose it to the rest of the world or even to Kamloops. So my circle is probably very different than your circle. Who are some people that you've kind of been watching that you think have great talent that might not be on a lot of people's radar?
Well, in the development community, there are some people. I mentioned Joshua across the street, Brendan Shaw. Some younger folks, Scott Campbell, guys that are in their kind of early 30s and really making a mark and really see Kamloops as their future, up and comers that way. And I'm quite involved in sports and in particular basketball. And I see people like Carolyn Boomer and Sukir and those people that really are passionate about making sports a way of life and particularly using it as a path forward for young kids. And celebrating Kamloops' history as the tournament capital of Canada and really utilizing that not only for sport but for marketing in terms of tourism and hospitality. So there's some great people out there. But the other place that I've noticed some great talent is on the counselor list, right? And I'm just getting to know some of the candidates that are on that list. I don't have as much time to see them at debates and things like that. But there's some very talented people, and all there for the right reasons, all there because they want to help Kamloops. They all have very different visions. Some of them come from, different sectors of the community, some that I wasn't even aware of, but certainly all have that same passion, that drive, and that desire to serve. So that's a good sign, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been lucky to speak with about 66% of them. I'm trying to chat with all of them, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to meet with me. We're getting close to the time that you kind of allotted myself and limited. We have maybe 5 to 7 more minutes. What's something you want to chat about that you think you want to put out there? Anything at all?
Well, we have a number of things right now. Anytime you have an election, it's a snapshot in time, right? And so, we have some issues right now in Kamloops that, need to be focused on. Right now, there's an inordinate amount of attention being played on the cannabis industry and the fact that
I love that industry.
next week, you're going to see the first retail cannabis store open in British Columbia. It's going to be open here in Kamloops. And interestingly enough, I have had national media in through my office over the last 2 weeks that I rarely get. Right, not too often the Canada Press or the CTV national feed wants to talk to the mayor of Kamloops, but this week they do, and they do because of this anomaly, right? And as I've said to them, I said, right now this is it's a big deal, but they're playing this up as if it's going to be reefer madness in Kamloops come the 17th and whatnot, and they fail to realize that a year from now this is going to be people wondering what the fuss was all about. The reason that the industry is starting in Kamloops is because Kamloops as a city has done its due diligence in terms of being prepared for accepting cannabis retail licenses and doing the zoning and dealing with the policing and the security and the social side of it. So that's why I believe the provincial government and now a string of private retailers are coming to Kamloops to set up because we're ready. That doesn't mean that other cities won't be ready. Of course they will, and they will be ready sooner rather than later, I suspect. But right now we're first, and we're getting a lot of attention. That's one issue. And the other issue is this whole opioid crisis. As a former public health professional, this is something that keeps me awake at night. I find it just intolerable that we can have last year 37 people die, the year before 44 people die in a city of our size.
Yeah.
And the person years of life loss from that tragedy is just unbelievable. And if it was from any other reason, we would absolutely be going crazy as a community in terms of tripping over each other to find solutions. And yet with this, we seem to be complacent and allow it to kind of drone on and continue. And, I have worked with the health authority. I want them to take a more serious look at some of the harm reduction aspects that are going on in our community. And I want to have better detoxification services available, because when people do have that wake up feeling that they want to break this addiction, they don't have a place to go. And I've had parents phone me in my office pleading with me to have the police arrest their children. Why? Because those kids have no place to go, and they know if they continue with the behavior that they are on, they're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough thing to wrestle with as the mayor and as the chair of the police commission. So, those kinds of gaps need to be filled, and that's something that we really need to work on as a city, and we need to do that. And, we have to do that, as a city that still supports things like growth and things like expanding our tax base so that we can afford some of the things we would like to do for those less fortunate.
Yeah, I lost a friend, a new friend in Ottawa, brilliant kid, my age, very civically minded, to I'm pretty sure it was opioids. I didn't know the full extent of it, but, all of Canada is going to feel his loss because they don't realize the potential he had.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If you saw who he was online and stuff, he was out in the community, a normal bloke, right? Much like, myself, but just had these demons. Right. And, I feel for anyone who has problems with addiction, because I struggle with my own.
Yeah, there's too many stories just like that, and if you look at the long list of obituaries in British Columbia of opioid deaths, there are people with huge amounts of talent, huge amounts of energy that have been lost to a disease. It's chronic relapsing addictive disorder, and let's treat it for what it is, and let's, just like any other disease, try to find a cure. You can't imagine how many walks and runs and things like that I get involved in the course of the year for everything, from diabetes to glaucoma, and yet we never seem to come together as a community to really seriously face this one down. So it's something we have to do.
I'm really hopeful as a cannabis advocate. Actually, it was probably one of the first emails you ever got was I was mad at the council about their city cannabis form a year ago, whatever be. You could probably find it. They had that cannabinoid opioid thing here at Mastermind Studios, or TRU, recently, right?
Yeah, I was there, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm very hopeful that, cannabis can hopefully take a hard hit into this pharmaceutical world, because I'm currently on pharmaceuticals, and I don't love it, but they're doing their job or whatever.
Yeah, the interesting part of that, I was there, I could only hear Terry Lake and MJ, the epidemiologist from the Addictions Research Foundation, but I was interested in the notion that you're talking about cannabis as an exit drug, as opposed to what everybody has traditionally thought is cannabis as a gateway drug, right?
Totally.
And changing that paradigm, I think, is very important. So,
yeah, I credit cannabis as the reason I was able to make it this far, because I was self-medicating, right?
Yeah.
I'm not self-medicating anymore, and that's a good thing. But looking forward to seeing the retail stores, especially the private sector, right? As someone who's been involved in the industry, or a user in some capacity, really want to see those young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who were advocating for years have the opportunity to almost get vindicated, right? But yeah, we're pushing it close to the end of our chat based on our schedules.
Right.
What are some parting words you want to kind of share, or where can people find you or reach out to you?
Well, certainly they can email me at kenchristian at telus.net. That's my private email, and they can certainly reach out by Twitter, or they can try the Facebook. Sometimes it comes through, sometimes it doesn't. But more importantly, and speaking for all of the candidates, what we really need to see is that people get out and vote on the 20th, or if they get out and vote in the period in the advanced polling, that would be just as good. We're out there putting ourselves on the line, and we're working hard. Everybody's working hard. And you owe it to the group of candidates to just take that time on the 20th or before and exercise your franchise. It's part of our participatory democracy, and this is your chance to do the participatory part and participate. Voter turnout has been traditionally very low, and our collective goal is to see it go up.
Absolutely, yeah. And I keep sharing with anyone who would listen, especially to a younger generation, we have the most to gain, but also the most to lose in these elections if we don't show up, or we do show up. Right? If we really want to shape Kamloops to be more Leon Johns, more Stations, more Redbeards, more of these, far and wide, we we want to shape Kamloops into the place that we always envision it, and want to give ourselves the opportunity to, because we have the most on the line.
Oh yeah.
I got what, 40 more years before I can consider retiring. That's if I pay off my student loans. So
yeah.
It's an exciting time.
You mentioned Far and Wide. Huge shout out to Callie Joe at Far and Wide and her partner. They're really taking risks
Bree and
down
Callie
there.
Duncan.
Yeah. It's just fabulous that they're in there, and young entrepreneurs is the way of the future. So
and also it's collaboration over competition too, right? You can work together to collectively raise your profiles, get people exposure, and really build that sense of community rather than hey, it's just us.
Yeah.
They've got this really great balance. Check them out. They're on 4th Ave, just tucked away kind of behind like the Fresh Slice, right next to the Grindhouse. But anyways, thank you, Ken, for meeting with me today. If I can ask people one thing, is get out and vote on the 20th or before. There's advanced polling options. Ken's actually got all the places to vote listed on his brochure. So pick one of those up if you want to know more about him. And if I can ask another thing, is subscribe or share this podcast with anyone who you think might get to know Ken a little bit more, the human that he is. And thank you once again there, Ken, for chatting with me on Cameo Podcast.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.